Hey fourth graders, it's Miss Seals. I'm back for our third science lab of the school year. So we have been talking about physical properties. Hopefully you remember that physical properties are ways that we can describe objects. Last week we were talking about the physical property of mass, which remember means how much matter is in an object. And then I taught you two different tools that we use to measure the mass of an object, the primary balance and the triple beam balance. Today we're going to be talking about another property, which is volume. And I'm not talking about how loud or quiet something is. It's a different type of volume, which I'm going to explain in just a minute. So today you have two targets again. The first one says, I can collect, record, and analyze information using tools, including graduated cylinders. So I'm going to be showing you how to use a tool called graduated cylinder, which you have probably seen and hopefully used before. But if not, it's okay because I'm going to show you. And your other target says, I can measure, compare, and contrast to physical properties of matter, including volume. So you might be wondering, Miss Seals, what is volume? If it's not loud or quiet, what are you talking about? So this says volume. I have two pictures, maybe to kind of get you thinking about what volume is. So look at those two pictures. What could volume be talking about? And then I have your two targets again. I can collect, record, and analyze information using tools, including graduated cylinders, and I can measure, compare, and contrast physical properties of matter, including volume. So now we need to know, Miss Seals, what is volume? Volume is how much space an object takes up. So we've been talking about that word matter, and we have said that matter is anything around us that takes up space. So volume is the measurement of how much space it takes up. So today we're going to learn how to measure volume to figure out how much space an object takes up. So how do we measure volume, Miss Seals? That's a great question. To find the volume of a regularly shaped object, such as a cube or a rectangular prism, you measure the length, width, and height of the object and multiply them together. So this is just a formula showing you that length times width times height equals volume. Okay, you don't need to know this formula. This is something you will learn in 5th grade. I just put it here to show you that when we have what we call a regularly shaped object, we can use this formula to find how much space it takes up. A regularly shaped object is an object where the faces are squares or rectangles, they're flat, they have straight lines. Okay, this formula can only be used on a regularly shaped object. Here are some more examples of regularly shaped objects. Bricks, dice, a cardboard box, wooden blocks. All of these things are what we call regularly shaped because if you notice, they have straight sides, and then their faces are rectangles or squares. They are flat. You can easily take a ruler or a measuring stick and you can measure the length of this box and the width of this box and the height of this box. And you can multiply those numbers together. Then you'll know the volume. You'll know exactly how much space these objects are taking up. Okay? However, if an object is not regularly shaped, we can't do that. So that's what we're going to focus on today. How do we find the volume of an irregularly shaped object? So an irregularly shaped object is an object that does not have faces that are squares or rectangles, and their sides are not straight lines. Their sides cannot be measured, okay? So what I mean by that is, look at these pictures. The rock, the seashell, the coffee mug, the toy car. I told you a second ago that to find the volume of a regularly shaped object, I have to measure the length, width, and height. Well, look at this rock. Could we easily measure the length of this and get an accurate measurement? We couldn't, because look, right here, it is much longer than it is up here. So I wouldn't know where to measure the length from because it's not a regular shape. Same with the height. Look at the seashell. It's much taller here than it is here. So where would I measure the height from? It's not a regular shape. Okay, so to find the volume of an irregularly shaped object, you can't multiply the length, width, and height. You have to do something else, and that's what we're going to talk about today. To find the volume of an irregularly shaped object, we use a process called water displacement, which sounds like a big word. Let's break it apart. So what is water displacement, Miss Seals? To displace means to move from one place to another. So water displacement is when water is moved. Water takes up space, and when something is put into that same space, the water needs some place to go, so the water gets pushed or moved out of the way. The amount of water that moves can be measured to find the volume of the object that was put into the water. So what I mean by that, and I have a bathtub here to help you kind of make a connection. Have you ever decided, I'm going to take a bath tonight. I want to relax. So you fill up the bathtub, and maybe you're not paying attention, so you fill it up a little too far. You get into the bath, and what happens? Some of that water goes up. It rises up. And maybe if you even filled it up way too far, some of it spills out over the edge of the bathtub and makes a big mess, right? That's because the water in the bathtub is taking up space. Water is matter. It takes up space, right? It's taking up all the space in the bathtub. But guess what? Your body also has volume and takes up space. So when your body gets into the bathtub, it needs some place to go. So what it does is it pushes some of that water up and out. If we were able to measure how much water is pushed up and out, we would be able to find the volume of your body, or how much space your body takes up. That's water displacement, okay? When water is moved or pushed somewhere else, and then that water is measured to find the volume of the object, all right? So if you're confused, just hang on. It'll make more sense. So how do we do water displacement? You have to know the volume of the water you are starting with. So in that bathtub example, you would need to have a way to measure and find out how much water is in the bathtub before you start. But we're not going to use bathtubs today because we're in science lab. So to do this, we're going to use a science tool called a graduated cylinder that looks like this. And we're going to observe the starting level of the water before the object is put in. So we're using a graduated cylinder. A graduated cylinder is a tool that measures volume. All right? And volume is measured in milliliters, which is written as a lowercase m and a capital L. So just like when we're talking about last week, how we were talking about we need to label our unit when we were measuring mass, we labeled with a G for grams. Same thing here, but we're not measuring mass, we're measuring volume, which is measured in milliliters. Okay, so anytime you write a number for volume, make sure you label it with that lowercase m and capital L. So here's what I mean. Here's an up close picture of my graduated cylinder with water in it. And I'm showing you right now the volume of the water by itself is 300 milliliters. If I look at where the water level is, it's matched up with that big line right there that says 300. So the water is taking up 300 milliliters of space. That's its volume, okay? And the reason this water looks blue is just because I added food coloring to it so that you'd be able to see it a little bit more. If not, it's pretty much the same color as the graduated cylinder and it's really hard to read. So it says the volume of the water by itself is 300 milliliters. Does everyone see how I found that? All right. So that's how I find out the volume of the water. Or that's my first step to water displacement, is finding out my volume of the water by itself, okay? My next step is I'm going to take my irregularly shaped object and I'm going to carefully place it in the water in the graduated cylinder. And I'm going to be very careful that no water splashes out. If water splashes out, that's going to make my results incorrect or inaccurate. I need the water to stay in the graduated cylinder, okay? Then I'm going to look and see where the water level is now. So here's my graduated cylinder with my water in it. And look, I put in my rock. My rock is irregularly shaped. It doesn't have sides that are squares or rectangles, okay? It's bumpy and lumpy. It's an irregular shape. So I put it into my graduated cylinder and I need to look and see where my water level is now. Okay, so look, it was here. Now it's here. Before I can continue, I need to figure out what each of these lines on my graduated cylinder is counting by. It's kind of like, do you remember learning in 2nd and 3rd grade when we talked about thermometers and how they're all different, and so you're going to have to look at it and figure out what to skip count by? Same with graduated cylinders, because look, I have some that are really, really big, and these lines skip count differently than these lines on this small one. So you're going to have to look at it and think. Sometimes you'll be skip counting by 5s or 10s or 20s or even 50s or 100s. So let's look. This big line right here is 300, and then up here I see 400. Okay, so if I skip count by 10s, let's see if that works. We have 310, 320, 330, 340, 350, 360, 370, 380, 390, 400. So that tells me that on this graduated cylinder, each of those lines represents 10 milliliters. All right, we're skip counting by 10s. So now this is showing me that the volume of the water and the rock together is 320 milliliters. I was at 300, 310, 320, okay? But that's telling me the water and the rock together. I don't want to know the water and the rock together. I want to know the volume of this rock. That's what I'm trying to figure out. How much space does this rock take up? So how can I find the volume of just the rock? Let's think. The volume of the water alone was 300 milliliters, just the water. The volume of the water and the rock together is 320 milliliters. How can I find out the volume of the rock by itself? You're going to have to do some math here, okay? Science and math are connected. They're related. Scientists use math all the time. But I want you to think, what operation would we use to find this out? We know the combined total is 320. We know one part of that is 300. I want to know the other part of that. I want everyone to think about what they could do to solve this problem. We can subtract. If you said subtract, you are exactly right. The volume of the water and the rock together was 320 milliliters. There's my 320. The volume of the water alone was 300 milliliters. That means the volume of the rock alone is 20 milliliters. My total volume was 320. My water by itself was 300. That means my rock by itself is 20. You can check your answer. The volume of the water, which was 300 milliliters, plus the volume of the rock, which was 20 milliliters, should equal the total of the water and rock together, which was 320 milliliters. Does 300 plus 20 equal 320? Yes, it does. Very good. So we have found that the volume of our rock is 20 milliliters. Okay, let's do some practicing together. So I know that this experiment would be much better for you if you were here and you could see the graduated cylinders up close and you could touch and do all of this stuff up close. However, we're doing the best we can, right? We're virtual school right now, so we're going to do the best we can. I will do my best to hold it up to show you, okay? So we are now going to find the volume of this toy car. Do we agree that this is an irregular shape? Yeah, I couldn't measure the length of it because look, this part is longer than this part, and then this part is wider than this part. It would be impossible to follow that formula of length times width times height because all the length and the height and the width are different depending on what part I'm measuring. It's not a regular shape. So I'm going to use water displacement. All right. So remember, the first thing I said I need to do is I need to find out what my starting volume is. What is the volume? There we go. Hold on. There we go. What is the volume of my water by itself? How much space is the water taking up by itself? If you said 200 milliliters, you are correct. I know it's 200 because it's even with this big line right there that's labeled 200, all right? So I found the volume of my water by itself. Now remember I said I'm going to carefully put my object into the water. I don't want any water to splash out. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to kind of turn the graduated cylinder so the car can just kind of carefully roll in there. All right. And notice that my water went up. That car, when it went into the water, it displaced some of it. It pushed some of the water out of the way to make room. Now I need to figure out how much water it pushed out of the way. Okay, so this graduated cylinder is different than the one we just looked at. Before we can find out what the volume is, I need to figure out what they're counting by on this graduated cylinder. I see 200 here. I see 250 here. So if I count by tens, like on the other one, 210, 220, 230, 240, 250, that doesn't make sense, right? Because 250 is up here. So what about fives? Let's try fives and see if we can count by fives. 200, 205, 210, 220. I'm sorry, let's start that. Miss Seals got distracted. 200, 205, 210, 215, 220, 225, 230, 235, 240, 245, 250. So that tells me this graduated cylinder is counting by fives. Each of those lines represents 5 milliliters. All right, so let me get this even to where you can see it nice and flat. All right, so who thinks they can tell me what the water level is at now? What is the volume of our car and our water together? We just said we're counting by fives, so there's 205, 210, 215. Okay, so now my water level with the water and the car is at 215 milliliters. But remember, I just want to know the volume of the car. I want to know how much space the car takes up. So we're going to start with our biggest number, our total. The car and the water together had a volume of 215 milliliters, right? Then I'm going to subtract the volume of the water by itself was 200 milliliters. So if I subtract my car and my water minus just my water, that's going to tell me the volume of my car. Okay, so 5 minus 0 is 5. 1 minus 0 is 1. 2 minus 2 is 0. So that tells me the volume of the car is 15 milliliters. So when I write my answer, I would write it like this: 15, and then I would label my number little m, capital L. That means the car is taking up 15 milliliters of space. That's its volume. Okay, let's do one more together. All right. This time, I want to know the volume of this little, it's like a little flower pot or something you could put a plant or a flower in. Okay? Irregular shape, right? I couldn't measure the width of this because look, it's way wider here than it is here. All right, so it's not a regular shape, it's an irregular shape, so we're going to use water displacement. Here's my graduated cylinder. I'm using the big one this time. First thing we need to do is what? What do I need to do before I can start? You're right, I need to find the volume of the water by itself before I put anything in it. Okay, so this is showing me that the volume of the water by itself is 600 milliliters. Does everyone see that? My water line is at 600, so that's the volume of the water by itself. Next thing I'm going to do is what? Very good. Am I just going to drop it or throw it in there? No, I'm going to carefully set the object in the water. This is kind of tricky because I want it to go all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to take my marker, kind of push it down there. There we go. All right. So I put the object in my graduated cylinder carefully. Now I need to figure out what the volume of my water and my object are together, right? So we need to figure out what we're counting by. This is a big graduated cylinder, so we're going to be counting by a bigger number. Look, there's 600. There's 800. Do you see that line in between that's a little bit longer than the others? That's halfway between 600 and 800. What is halfway between 600 and 800? 700. You're exactly right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are 4 lines between them. I'm going to try counting by 20s and see if I'm right. So we have 600, 620, 640, 660, 680, 700, 720, 740, 760, 780, 800. So do we agree that we are counting by 20s? Yes, each of these lines represents 20 milliliters, okay? So let me hold it flat so you can see the volume of the water and the object together. So we said we're counting by 20s. There's 600, 620, 640, 660. All right? So now I want to find the volume of the object by itself. Here's our math. Our total volume of our water and our object together was 660 milliliters, right? The volume of the water by itself was 600 milliliters. All right, so now I'm going to subtract to find the volume of the object. 0 minus 0 is 0. 6 minus 0 is 6. 6 minus 6 is 0. So that means the volume of my object, or the amount of space that it takes up, is 60 milliliters. All right? Good job. You guys did awesome with that. So this is what you're going to do when the video is over. You are going to go back into Schoology. There is a short little quiz for you to take about volume and water displacement, okay? Remember that, the quizzes and assessments I give you here in Science Lab, they're not for a grade, they're not required, but they will help you out and help you practice some of those concepts that you are learning in science class. And it does let your teacher and I know what concepts we need to keep practicing with you. Okay, so I hope that you'll take the quiz. I hope that you will do your best. I hope that you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye, 4th grade.